Good afternoon, everyone. Nazreen Ibrahim here from Socially Acceptable, featuring a very special guest today. And I will welcome him onto StreamYard and ask him to join my stream here. I'm very excited to introduce to you as part of our initiative with the AI Africa Report. So the AI Africa Report is a project from Socially Acceptable, aims to become the most comprehensive portal of knowledge and research on the African continent. To this end, we have already done interesting conversations with innovators, thinkers, and thought leaders across the continent. And today, I'm very, very pleased because it's been a year in my dream and plans to be able to interview this particular guest we have today. Many of you will know Prof. Tshilidzi Marwala as the Vice-Chancellor and Principal at the University of Johannesburg. He is also the Deputy Chairperson of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and a Trustee on the Nelson Mandela Foundation. That's just a very tiny bit of his very extensive and accomplished resume. He's known globally for his work in the technology sector and space, and he's bringing a lot of innovation as well as pursuing the conversation around what 4IR means for us in South Africa, as well as for the African continent. So I'm very, very pleased to welcome him today. Prof. Marwala, thank you for joining us on the AI Africa Report.
No, thank you very much for inviting me, Nazreen, and also good afternoon to your listeners.
This is great that I've gotten some time to chat with you. Since our last conversation, when I first managed to secure some time in your diary, there have been quite a few developments. I would say from the end of July until the beginning or going through August, I know that the Presidential Commission released their first report to President Cyril Ramaphosa. I'm not sure that those have been published yet, but those presentations were made by yourself and the Minister of Communications. The other thing to happen was the AI dialogue that was instituted on the 5th of August. An expression of interest was released. I was one of the companies and organizations that also signed them. So I think pretty much we will talk a lot about the recent happenings and your view, sir. Your view is critical to us as AI enthusiasts, researchers, and workers in the field. And I think what I want to take away for our viewers today is how we become more active citizens in terms of understanding our role as we try to put ourselves in the space of artificial intelligence and what it could do for us. So I think I will kick off by allowing you first to let's set the scene. You've got an impeccable reputation globally for your work and multidisciplinary approach, including the application of AI. As the Deputy Chair of the Presidential Commission on 4IR, what are some of your current observations of the state of AI in South Africa and Africa?
Well, the state of AI in South Africa and Africa is mixed. If I start with the African continent, we have pockets of excellence. If you go to Ghana, Google has just established an Africa AI lab in Ghana. I think it costed them $1 billion, where you have an aggregation of AI experts that come from Africa. Some of them come from outside Africa, and many of them were trained outside Africa. And that is a positive development. Microsoft is in Kenya, and they are also establishing AI capabilities there. If you look at countries, the impressive country, Rwanda, is doing fantastic work. Drones that are delivering medical needs to rural community. I am a chair of the International Advisory Body in Rwanda on Internet of Things, which is one of the key technological developments that are happening within the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Now, if we come here to South Africa, we have pockets of excellence. If you go to the CSIR and you go and you will find expertise, people who are working on natural language processing, and they've been working on natural language processing for the past 15 to 20 years and even more. If you go to many of our universities, you're going to find excellent experts who are working in all areas of artificial intelligence. What we do not have, and this is actually at the core of our recommendations of the fourth industrial revolution, we do not have a coordinated approach. So one of our recommendations is the establishment of the National Artificial Intelligence Institute. And obviously the dialogue that we started on AI is a journey towards the establishment of such an institute where people from the private sector and from the public sector can come together and develop and implement and apply this technology to all sectors of our economy, whether it is in agriculture, whether it is in medical care, whether it is in manufacturing, so that we can increase South Africa's competitiveness. The ability to compete is not going to be possible unless we invest in key technologies such as artificial intelligence.
What I'm hearing you say, Prof, is that citizens, through the AI Dialogues initiative, should aim to become a more active part of how this technology is used to impact the country, because it's citizens who are the end users of this product, right?
Absolutely. And there are already excellent work that is happening. For example, you have a body called Deep Learning Indaba. You know, it was started by Shakir Mohammed and Vukosi Maribate. Incidentally, they were my master's students many, many years ago, maybe about 15 years ago. And Shakir went to Cambridge to do a PhD and ultimately is working for Google DeepMind in London. And Vukosi went to United States, Rutgers University in New Jersey, where he did a PhD in AI. And what they are doing is bringing AI skills to society. They run these Indabas on average, many of them, the Indaba X and the proper Indaba, which is a longer one where they will fly in experts, and now we use technology, wealth experts to come and talk about this technology. So those are very important development. If we are going to have activists within the mode of artificial intelligence, we shall need institutions and forums such as the Deep Learning Indaba. The president, when he took over as the chair of the African Union, one of his recommendations is to drive the establishment of Africa AI Forum, so that we here in the continent, across the board, from Cape to Cairo and from Madagascar to Morocco, we can collectively think together as to how we can be able to implement AI so that it can be able to advance our economic well-being as countries and as a society.
Prof, I just want to clarify and also get your insight before we discover or investigate other questions we have in our conversation. Should people of different backgrounds who are not particularly in the traditional sense of being technically minded, or the ones who are driving the creation of the systems, building the algorithms, like developers, software engineers, systems engineers, should it be anyone from any background who should find the power to step into the space to have active conversations? Should we be as citizens doing that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that is actually quite crucial. I mean, if you look at the Turing Award winner, maybe the most famous person to win, the name has just slipped off. He studied psychology.
Yes.
You know, he did not study computer science. He won a Turing Award, and he's one of the inventors of deep learning. So the diversity of disciplines is very, very, very important. The reason is because AI is actually a very multidisciplinary subject. I was an undergraduate student in North America, so I was exposed to multidisciplinary education. And one of the courses that I took as part of my engineering courses was psychology. I took 2 psychology classes. When I went to AI much later in my PhD, and they talked about reinforcement learning, big AI algorithm. I already knew about it because I learned about it in psychology. Pavlov, his dogs, theory of motivation, ultimately reinforcement learning. So this is actually very important that people must come from different disciplines. Now you have natural language processing.
Yes.
Natural language processing requires the knowledge of AI. It requires the knowledge of linguistics. So ideally, if you are going to do it well, you will have to have psychologists, you will have to have linguists, and you will have to have computer scientists. And if you look at the application of AI to to medicine, and we have spent quite a great deal of time actually looking into this, you would actually realize that for these applications to be effective, you will need people from the medical field, not as spectators, by the way, as an integral part of the algorithmic development, because their insights become very important to make sure that these things actually succeed.
I'm glad you spoke about that, Prof, because the following on question from the responsibility of citizens was around your observations on how AI is used in the new normal that coronavirus has brought in the pandemic, from the lockdown to contact tracing and other scenarios. But as you have touched on that, and I know we have a few questions to look through, do you think, and I've been thinking about this quite deeply, do you think the general public need to start getting a better grasp of how their data is used to teach and train AI-powered systems? And how do you believe they should do this? How should we as general citizens do this?
No, absolutely. I mean, data is very important. In fact, I am on a committee that is looking into the ethics of AI in medicine. It's a committee of the World Health Organization. And one of the things that we have to tackle when we deal with ethics of AI, firstly, you have data. So data, the collection of data, if you don't collect it well, if your data collection is not comprehensive enough, the consequence of that is that your AI system is going to discriminate and do other things that might include harming people.
Yeah.
Then once you gather data and you process it and it is ready to be trained, then you have to do algorithmic design. If you don't design it well, again, you will have problems. Algorithmic design might actually even include which algorithms you are going to use, because AI is quite broad. We know about deep learning. Deep learning is just a neural network with multiple layers. But there are other forms of AI. Even within the mode of machine learning, support vector machines, which have been very successful in classification problems, where you are classifying whether what you're buying is good or it is bad, and so on and so forth. So you have that. And then you have the user. And then you need to also think about, is it going to be human in the loop? Which basically means the algorithm is recommends to a human being and the human being takes a decision.
Yeah.
Or is it going to be a human on the loop, which means the algorithm does everything, but the human being is watching very carefully? A situation that you see in aeroplanes with autopilot. The pilot is there. Those 2 pilots are there. They are checking whether anything is going wrong. And if something goes wrong, they intervene. But if nothing goes wrong, they're just observing. They're on the loop. And then you have the third one, which is controversial, which is human out of the loop.
Yeah.
Can we send a robot to an operating room, and as doctors go for lunch and be confident of the outcome. Of course, maybe in 100 years' time or even 50 years' time, we'll be able to do that. But those are some of the key issues that are confronting us, and we have to tackle them. And to tackle them will require people from multiplicity of disciplines. It will require multiplicity of skills, understanding of data. Now, coming to your question, how do we bring the people into data? Now, I will talk about a recommendation of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission. And one of these recommendations is avail and secure data to spur economic development in using technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Because data is the new oil. Without data, you cannot have AI. Now, what we need to do now as a society is what are we going to do about our data? Firstly, we need to gather it. It's said that Facebook gathers more data in South Africa than the South African government.
It's a fair point.
It's said, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, they gather data, so much data that which we are not gathering. So we need to develop capacity to gather the data. And of course, there are two types of data. There are data that are private, and there are data that are public. For example, data about movement of cars in our streets, which can be used by small and medium enterprise to build an application which that particular individual can sell to the municipality so that they can deal with the problem of traffic.
Sure.
That should be open data. But data on medical records, if it goes into the public, it has to be anonymous, which basically means it becomes a neutral data that you can't link to an individual. Important. It is important that the database of all the X-rays that we take must be put in a single database so that the people in AI can build an AI system that will look at those images and be able to make a diagnosis better than human doctors.
So I'm listening to you. I agree with what you're talking about. The level to which we should get as an economy, as a digital economy, is to understand how the data source is being produced, which is us as the citizens, who's got the most access to it in the first instance. And the secondary layer on top of that is obviously to have good digital governance, is also to allow a government to be able to have insight into that data so that better service delivery or citizens' rights are met. At the moment, I know in this country, we have a debate around that. And so people, on the one hand, don't really understand their rights around how they could protect their data. But on the other side, maybe there's a disconnect between whether government is collecting it effectively and could have a positive impact for all citizens. I think we have that currently in the country, from my observation.
No, absolutely. I mean, it is clear, and this is another recommendation of the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission. It is clear that we need to update and modernize our laws so that they are able to handle some of the issues that you are raising around data, so that they are able to handle some of the necessary regulatory matters around Facebook and Twitter gathering data in South Africa. At the moment, they are basically gathering it without any form of recommendation. Yeah.
Sorry.
And then, it is clear that we need to rethink ICASA, which was a company a regulatory company that was created during a broadcasting era,
That's true.
Analog broadcasting era, whereas now many television content is coming to people through digital channels, not through broadcasting. and they are not able to regulate digital channels, including Netflix, by the way.
That's also right. I personally don't want to hear regulation of Netflix, because what would we watch then? But I'm wondering, and just to tie up that question before we move on, is would, as part of the recommendation of the report, would a first necessary step, and I hope it would be, because I think people want to be able to talk about this more actively, would there be intense and prolonged stakeholder discussions, external stakeholder, citizen discussions around these ideas of data and who owns it and what is it going to be used for, before we can set them in stone? I hope we can see that. But I won't ask you to answer, because I'm sure that maybe those recommendations can't be yet fully discussed, but I hope that would be the case.
No, absolutely. I mean, I have openly talked about these recommendations. I have written about these recommendations so that people can challenge them and they can come up with better recommendations. And these things are never fixed, because we are dealing with issues of technology that is not stationary.
Yeah.
Technological developments are going on. They are marching on. So whatever we are going to come up with in June 2020 is probably not going to be the same as what we should be doing in June 2021.
Absolutely.
So the ability to be flexible is really, really crucial in this era in which we find ourselves.
I really like that, because I think if one thing that the pandemic has taught us or thrown into sharp relief is the ability to be adaptable, so much to the point that if you had to leave, if right now I had to lose my job, my home, my family, sounds like an apocalypse, what would I actually do? Or how would I actually think around that? So it's been an interesting time, I think, for every single person in this country and across the globe. Prof, what do you think, going on from our conversation, what do you think are the top 3 factors for you affecting the deployment and development of AI tech on the continent?
No, I think the first one is the number of people who can understand these algorithms, and that links to education.
Absolutely.
Because you to actually go and be able to understand deep learning, you will have to understand calculus.
Yes.
To train it, you require something called back propagation network, back propagation algorithm, which is basically a mathematical concept of calculating what is called gradient. I know it sounds very,
intensely
like
technical, but it's fine.
You need to understand calculus.
Yes.
You need to understand statistics, because once you are training these things, you have to know about what cross validation means.
Yeah.
You have to understand what free parameters that are being estimated means. You have to understand what Bayes' theorem is, so that you can be able to estimate those parameters probabilistically. So the ability for us to master the mathematics is very, very crucial, especially calculus. Secondly, the ability to gather data, because these algorithms, once you understand this algorithm, you don't even have to write them. You can go to Google and get TensorFlow that is available for everybody who wants to use it, and then you can start training algorithms. But if you do not have data, then you are not going to be able to train. And what is happening at our universities, this is sad, that if they come up with an algorithm and they want to test it, they go to United States for data. We even know where these databases are. UCR, University of California at Irvine database, whether it is in the finance, whether it is in the human behavioral side, whether it is in the engineering side. And the reason for that is because we simply do not have an open, accessible database in South Africa where the people who are creating these algorithms can go and test their algorithm. Something as simple as putting anonymous X-ray images, maybe 50,000 of them, on a database and say, please, guys, go and create a deep learning algorithm that will be able to predict, whether the X-ray means the patient has, embolism, and so on and so forth, and then you start creating an ecosystem that will ultimately lead to startups. We don't have that data.
Yeah.
We have to go to the United States to have that data. And these are things that are simple to do, And as a result, the algorithms that are developed outside the African continent do not understand our specific conditions, because the quality of machines that you use, how long you keep them, will have an impact on the images that will ultimately be used to train these algorithms and be used to make diagnosis.
So what I want to ask you is, do you think then, there are many amazing individuals doing the work on the continent, developing new learning models, trying to generate the data sets that are particular to our cultures, languages, people, groups of people, and all types that would signify the African continent as an example. Do you think that we have to make a more concerted effort on how to formally consolidate these data sets to produce them for a specific purpose, as well as write with an aware mind on how we actually generate with more of a culturally specific output rather than just a general global, what can I say?
No, absolutely. I believe that what we do must be globally relevant, but it should also be locally relevant. It goes without saying that if we have a rich database that is open, I can almost assure you that we will not be the only one using it.
So we need to do the work now to be able to build that, because of course it's too small in its capability in order for us to richly inform the systems to actively address our concerns here.
No, I think you're right. Once you make things open, there is a danger that Silicon Valley will create apps for us. But I actually believe that if we are organized, we can be able to do that. Because if you go to Silicon Valley and see some of the people there, some of them are South Africans.
Yeah.
And there are many of them who are here in South Africa with probably the same type of capabilities that can be able to do these things. So we shouldn't be afraid of competition. We shouldn't close ourselves to the rest of the world because we are afraid that we are not going to globally compete. We need to instead prepare ourselves to globally compete. So yeah, those are my views.
Global competition also means that our thinking is in line with some of the happenings in the EU, the UK, as well as the US around AI ethics. What does AI ethics mean to you?
Well, AI ethics basically to me means use AI responsibly. Use AI to advance people's health, people's well-being, rather than to harm them. It naturally means that we need to make sure that the AI system does not discriminate. It naturally means that we have to build AI systems that do not deliberately make mistakes, or that do not make mistakes that are unavoidable. It means being able to use the latest developments to construct algorithm, because the latest technologies probably work better than the previous ones. all these things fall into AI. Unfortunately, globally, there is more investment into the development of these algorithms than on the ethical aspects of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now I was just reading, last night I was reading about Mark Zuckerberg complaining about Apple, because Apple is saying that on the iOS, which is their operating system, if you are on Facebook, for Facebook to start collecting your information, they will have to enter into some agreement with you as an individual that they can be able to pick up information about you, including where you are going, and so on and so forth. And and he was not happy about it. He's saying that it's going to restrict their business and it will have an impact on their bottom line. So those are ethical issues. Yeah. So if you wear an ethical, he was wearing a profit lens. He was more concerned about the profit, so he was wearing the profit glasses. If you wear the ethical glasses, you say, of course, of course, this sounds good. You are protecting the customer, because the customer might not want to be tracked where they are going.
It is sad that we must round up an incredibly interesting and robust conversation, which can go on, considering the number of examples and happenings that are happening globally and here at home. What do you think, in wrapping up our conversation, should be the way that we start actively building out a set of formal guidelines to enable AI ethics conversations, as well as the deployment of AI ethics frameworks in bills here on the continent?
No, I think the first thing is to be involved. We have to be involved, all of us, because this is not a technological issue, it is a human issue. When you go to hospitals, whether you know how to program in Python or not, you are going to be subjected to devices that are enabled by this technology. So be involved, be informed, very, very important. Make sure that the people who represent you in parliament actually understand these technologies, because the world of today require laws that are derived from the understanding of these technologies, and first-hand understanding of these technologies is much more beneficial than third or fourth or fifth-hand understanding of these technologies. We need to invest in these technologies. This investment means we need to have enough people who are paying good attention to mathematics so that they are able to thrive in this. If we get all those things well, we are actually going to succeed, and we are going to have a stake in artificial intelligence, and we probably are going to become makers of some of these technologies rather than consumers.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think a good, solid combination of responsible leaders who understand the tech, even in a basic format, coupled with responsible citizens who actively take ownership of what data security and privacy means to them, will be a good start for us to build some kind of beginning AI ethics frameworks. Prof. Marwala, I am very pleased you joined us today on the AI Africa Report. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to have many more conversations with you in the coming future.
No, thank you very much for the invitation, and I look forward to being invited again.
Thank you very much. So you've joined us on today's conversation for the AI Africa Report. We talked to one of the leaders of the AI conversation here in South Africa and globally, Prof. Tshilidzi Marwala, who is the Vice-Chancellor and the Principal at the University of Johannesburg, but also the Chairperson, Vice Chairperson on the Presidential Commission for 4IR. We told you that the AI Africa report is about giving back citizens education and power in order to be able to make effective decisions on how we allow the technology to develop our life, our lifestyles, and the futures of our kids and the kids to come. So I'm really excited you joined us today. Stay tuned for more informational and incredibly interesting conversations that are coming up in the following weeks when we find every other thought leader on the African continent to talk to about AI. For the AI Africa Report, I'm Nazarene Ibrahim. See you next week.